All right, guys, I'm going to show you a little bit about how to use watercolors. I'm going to demonstrate using these, which is what you have access to. But if you are on site, I also have some other ones that you can use. And if you are virtual but would like to come on site to use these watercolors, let me know and we can make arrangements for that. So these are just kind of like the standard, but then if watercolor is something that you're interested in, I do have some other options for you to explore. So let me know if that's something that you would like to do. So I've got my watercolors here, I've got paper towel, and then I've also got clean water and dirty water. We talked about this when we did the color wheels. It's very important to me. This is like, if you get nothing else artistic from my class, just know when you paint, you should always have clean water and dirty water. This is my dirty water, this is my clean water. Watercolor paints on their own are like dry or a little bit tacky, at least these kinds sold in pans like this. So you have to add water to them to activate them. So I'm just gonna dip, and this is why it's so important to have clean water and dirty water, because if I was using my dirty water to activate my paints, then I would have dirty paints. So I'm just dropping a couple drops in here. All right, I got a couple of colors going here. I'm gonna start with green. So the water's in there, I'm kind of stirring it up a little bit. And then I can just use it like this. Watercolor is very watery, as you would imagine. So you get kind of like translucent looks like this. If I wanted to, I can kind of like dig in here a little bit and get kind of a darker color. But really, the way you adjust your color is by adding more or less water, which it's difficult to do if you're just working in a pan like this. You really need your palette. So I'm going to now kind of scoop up a little bit of my green and put it over here. So this that I scooped up comes out about like this. And then if I wanted to make it more or less dark or light, I guess, you could add some more water to it, make it lighter. One thing you can do if you're wanting a really light color, and this may ruin your clean water, if your dirty water is already dirty, then you have to use your clean water and get new clean water. But you can go like this, and then just paint without even dipping back into the paint, and get some nice light shades like that. You can also do a little bit of mixing. So I'm clean first and dirty, then clean. So I could get some of my yellow and mix it into the green that I already have and get some custom shades that way. The shades that come in here are very boring, and I would not recommend using colors straight out of the pans. I would definitely recommend mixing your own colors. So you can do something like that. I want you to see what happens. I'm gonna get kind of a darker color. I'm gonna get some purple. I want you to notice what happens if I try to paint. So this down here is still like wet. This is still like a puddle. But even like this one here and this one here are still slightly wet, even if they're not like dripping. So if I try to go up here and paint next to these, you can see, depending on how wet the paint was, that some different things happened. So here where it was mostly dry, you can see it underneath a little bit, but it mostly was fine. Here, and even especially down into here, this paint bleeds into the paint that is already there. So you want to be very, very careful whenever you are working that you don't paint up next to wet paint. It will ruin it every time. You'll get stuff like this. So you want to make sure that you're letting your layers dry before you go back. Now, once something is dry, like this one, then I can go back and I can layer on top of it if I want to, like this, because watercolor works best in layers. Now, these are not the best watercolors. These are super cheap watercolors that are like student grade. So they don't work as well as maybe some like really nice watercolors, but even these, you can still layer on top. Watercolor works best in layers, so you definitely want to do layering with your watercolors. Now, I told you this never works. This could work if that's what you want. So for instance, I'm gonna clean my brush, and I'm going to paint just some water down here. And then I'm gonna get some blue. kind of drop it in where my water was. Let me get some purple. And you can see, because like I said, if there's water, if it's wet, it's going to go onto the page. You can get some really cool blending effects by doing this. Because the water is still wet when the paint is going on, instead of having like harsh lines, you have nice, soft, blended edges, which could be really cool if you were doing an ocean or a galaxy or a sunset, something where you want it to really blend, where there's not a harsh definition between blue and purple. It's just like very faded out. This is also very unpredictable. You're not going to be able to say like, oh, I'm going to get a perfect line of, you know, blue gradient purple. Like, it's going to just kind of do what it does. That's one of the things that you'll learn about watercolor, is that it's less about learning to control the watercolor and more about learning what to do when the watercolor does what it's going to do. So I have posted down below in the sketches assignment a Pinterest board with some inspiration. I am not saying that everything on that board is worthy of 100% in my class, and you definitely can't just copy something you find on there. It's just kind of to give you some ideas of what is possible with watercolor, to like maybe kind of bring some ideas to your mind. You're gonna do 4 watercolor sketches the same way you did 4 linoleum sketches, but if you would prefer, pretend like this is your sketchbook paper, you can just go like this and divide your page into 4 that way. It doesn't have to be 4 separate rectangles on 2 different pages. You can just kind of go like that. And I don't care if they're horizontal or vertical. It doesn't matter to me at all which way you orient your paper for this. So you're gonna do 4 sketches of what you think you might wanna do with watercolor. Again, using that Pinterest board for inspiration. You can also Google for inspiration. If you're familiar with watercolor, maybe attempt something a little bit more challenging, like some blending and stuff like that. If you are not familiar with watercolor, maybe you might go a little bit more simple so that you can practice your technique and work on things like not putting wet paint near each other. But it does need to be something that's interesting. A lot of y'all lately have gotten maybe a little bit lazy and have not been doing much other than just like something really, really simple. So do try to come up with something that's interesting to look at, that looks like a piece of artwork. That's what we're creating here, is a piece of artwork. So think of something that is interesting to look at, that you are capable of doing, that your mom would be proud to hang on the refrigerator. But also keep in mind kind of the unpredictability of watercolor, and think, well, what could I do with some of the way that watercolor behaves? Like, what could I, if I did something like this, what colors could I use and what could I turn that into? Could I turn it into a jellyfish, or, you know, something like that? Just try to be creative as you're thinking. Again, 4 sketches, the same with the lino sketches. If you want it to be 4 completely random ideas, that's fine. If you have one idea and you want to do 4 variations of that idea, that is also fine. So do your sketches, get them uploaded to the document. If you need to work on it over the long weekend, you can. We're gonna do the sketches in class today, but if you need to work on it over the weekend, just have your sketches uploaded by like 8 a.m. on Monday so that we can come to class and vote on them during your class period. If you need anything, let me know.